Welcome to TrueLook's Field Forward series. Today, we're going to spend some time talking about how to use different tools and a culture shift in construction. The biggest challenge we see in construction is often we've always done it this way, and we've been talking to leaders that really have a different approach in how they implement and how they put it into the field. And Scott Brown from Garney is certainly one of those leaders in the industry. I'm excited to chat with him today. Scott, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your history in the industry?
Sounds good, Joe. Yeah, so Joe said I'm the construction technology manager for Garney Construction. We're a water wastewater contractor, nationwide, one of the number one contractors in the water space. But yeah, a little bit about my background. I've been in this industry for about 18 years. About 10 of that's been in the kind of construction technology space. There's some folks who were there before me, but I was kind of in on the the early side of it. So I've seen a lot of change. I actually started out in the industry as a mechanic, doing heavy equipment type stuff and cranes and operation and got into like equipment maintenance. And in the course of that, saw a lot of technology over the years, but we were always kind of technology averse just because, that's just the way the industry is. And then I worked all over the US doing a lot of oil and gas and a lot of heavy civil work as well, but ended up moving back home and working for the local cat dealer. And that's kind of how I got into this construction technology space.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really fun. We talk to lots of people on this series and just in general. The folks that have had field experience always get the most street cred with their teams. So I can appreciate that. So how
Yep.
did you get involved with construction technology and what excites you the most about it? So it sounds like Cat got you involved in it, but kind of tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I was a area manager flying around on an airplane, traveling all over the US and got kind of burnt out on that, wanted to move back home, start a family kind of thing. And some buddies I worked with were at the local cat dealer. And I actually went back to Turner Wrenches at the cat dealer, and it was a really good mental reset for me. And while I was there, I started seeing a lot of this new machines coming through the shop, and it had technology from the factory on it. And everyone at the time was relatively ignorant to it. We were just kind of like, we knew it was there, but nobody really wanted to touch it or mess with it. And I was like, well, I had a little bit of experience with it. So I kind of raised my hands, like, I saw an opportunity where it's like, I think this stuff is, if it's coming from the OEM factory on the machines, like I see a potential for this. So I want to learn more about it. And so from there, I was working at the cat dealer. They have a Trimble dealer called SciTech that's owned by all the cat dealers. I went to work for those guys and just I think going to what excites me about it is I didn't know a dang thing. And so I was learning something new every day, but I kind of had that field background of when I went out there and talked to the guys, I kind of had, to your point, the street cred where I at least knew a bucket from the machine, right? And so, um, you know, gained a lot of experience and perspective and reputation relatively quickly with some local contractors here, and it was just super exciting. So I just kind of stuck with it. From there, I did a couple other things in technology space. Prior to coming to Garney, I had my own company where I was kind of like technology guy for hire. So have tried about everything in the space with some degree of success and some degree of failure. I've seen a little bit of everything.
That's where we get our best learning. It doesn't all have to be a home run. That's for sure.
Well, no, that's I think the challenge, we're going to talk a little about today, but like part of getting better is trying stuff with the expectation it's not all going to work, and being okay with that, but being calculated as well.
I love that. When you first introduce a new tool or workflow, what are the typical reasons or typical reactions you see from field teams?
Yeah, they typically vary from very excited to very skeptical. Everyone has a different relationship with technology, but I think we have to look at that and understand that. A quote that I really like is innovation happens at the speed of trust. And many folks have lost trust in technology, right? Due to bad past experiences. So we really try to take that into account of like, the goal is not to innovate for the sake of innovation. It's more to go solve problems and help people. And if we look at it like that and our field teams can see that we're genuinely trying to help them solve a problem instead of just saying, hey, here's some new tool or widget, that, the buy-in is much, much higher. So
I think that's a great answer. Yeah, absolutely. What are some of the common misconceptions crews have about new tech and how do you address them? I think you just answered one of them. Is it about me or is it about a tool? But anything you want
yeah,
to expand on?
I think for most folks, the initial reaction is, hey, we have this new thing. And I've done this, and because it's true, is it's more work. So initially, a lot of times new technology is more work. And so, you got folks who have a lot on their plate, a lot going on, and you hand them a new thing. You're like, hey, we got to figure this out. Right. And they're just looking at this like, what the heck, man? Like one more thing for me to do. So what our team is attempting to do is really make sure that they're actually seeing the benefit because there has to be some subtraction if we're going to continue to add things, right? We can't just continue to add with the expectation of something else doesn't come off their plate, right? Whether that's speeding up a process so they have more time or, making stuff simpler. So, they don't have to document it as much or whatever that may be. Like we can't just add, we have to show them how we're subtracting as well.
Yep. Okay. Awesome. That's a great answer too. All right. How do you encourage a mindset shift from we've always done it this way to let's try something new? And I imagine that plays back into the same idea of, you know, what's in it for me?
Yeah, for sure. This took me several years. I mean, I'll tell you what, I think construction technology got set back several years by us early folks who were selling and supporting it because we didn't know what we were doing. And so we went out there, we did bad demos, and we didn't set people up for success. And so they got a bad taste in their mouth. And I think it slowed the adoption of a lot of the like GPS and machine control space early on because we made it look a lot harder than it was, but we were learning along with everybody else, right? And so as I spent more time in that space, what I learned is if I can show a customer or a contractor or end user the end result, like the full benefit without showing them all the stuff you have to do, really show them what's possible and then dial back into like, hey, here's how you actually have to do that. But if we can lead with, hey, here's the end result and then here's the things you have to do. Once they see that, then they go, oh, okay, that makes sense. And then they're more bought into, hey, I have to invest in a person or data or hardware or whatever, right? But a lot of times we do all the, hey, here's everything you have to do. And it takes us 4 or 5 times to get a quality end result. And then all of a sudden it's like, why the heck am I doing this? So set yourself up on that first, especially that, first impressions are important. So make sure that first one's a good one. And then you can really dive into what it takes to be successful.
Yeah, that it's funny you said that. I always talk to my sales team about, all we have to do is have the first project like
Yep.
deployed. That'd be great. Everything's got to work just the way we want it to.
Yep.
Everybody's got to have a good experience with onboarding. And if that happens, and the tech does what it's supposed to do, it gets really easy to say, why don't we do this on another project? And I think we kind of,
100%.
yeah,
But and I think a lot of that comes with just, from leadership all the way down to the people actually doing it, like understanding what it takes to do that. You can't call on a Tuesday and want something on a Wednesday.
that's right.
A lot of these demos that we were doing that were successful is our initial meeting was a month ahead of time. And we took a month to make sure we had the site prepared, that we had the data prepared, that the machine was prepared, that, everyone was ducks in a row. And then that way, when we showed up on site and 15 minutes later, we're producing results. It's like, that was the effort of 20 hours of work that happened over the last month. But that doesn't matter in the moment of when we actually produce results. Just understanding that you can't call on Tuesday and want something on Wednesday. And if you do, you're just going to get a poor result most of the time.
Yep, you nailed it. Who inside an organization usually drives the culture check, whether that's leadership, supers, tech champions, and how do they influence adoption? So I imagine you've got a lot to say about this.
Yeah. I mean, I thought a little bit about this one and I honestly, the way I've seen most adoption happen is a quote younger person bugging someone in a leadership position. So usually it's they saw something on Instagram or one of their buddies is doing it, or, they're driving down the road and they see other stuff going on and they're like, why are we not doing that? And so they start asking the questions and those guys kind of typically become your champions. And I've seen a lot of father son combos as well in the construction industry where, dad started the company and turned it into a pretty good size outfit. And then the son is trying to take it to that next level and convince dad that, hey, we need to go do this technology stuff. Right. So I used to be involved in a lot of those conversations and they're super fun to have because there's both sides of a coin there. Right. Do you have to have technology to be successful? Not necessarily, but it definitely can have some value and benefit. To that point, I think a lot of the innovation happens out of what we're seeing is it happens out of a request or a requirement from an owner. So if you look at like DOT type work, DOT, used to not require GPS. And now every pretty much DOT job has some sort of GPS requirement on it. And then when you come to paving, same thing. There's technology requirements, actually wrote into the spec. So it comes down to, there's multiple different ways I think innovation happens. I think the best way is someone being curious and willing to go try something new. You have to have a willing participant to go do it. And usually what happens is you find a willing participant, and then the decision maker, says, well, for me to stay competitive, I probably should go figure this out. Right. So a lot of different reasons it happens, but yeah, finding the willing person to go tackle the challenge is the most important thing.
It's funny you mentioned that. In my past life, I was very bad at PowerPoint presentations, just terrible at them. And I worked on
Yeah.
a team. This was a long time ago. And I told my manager that, and he goes, "Well, you know what you're in charge of now? It's all the PowerPoint presentations for all of our team meetings." And it ended up, I bet that happens in y'all's world too, where it's like that young, that person that's real excited about the tech, then they just end up owning it. The owner or the leadership goes, "Well, great. We'll give you this leash. You own it, and let's
Yep.
see how well it works."
Yeah, and I've actually pushed back on our teams a little bit to understand that, like, there's a pretty heavy burden if you're going to be that champion. If you've got a full-time job as a field engineer, adding on, project technology champion or whatever title you want to give it, there's a value there, and there's also, some burden. So pushing back and making sure they understand what it takes to do that successfully. And, making sure our team's real job is to figure out who these champions are and go support those folks. We got about 2,800 employees in Garney. I can't take care of all time, but if I can build a core group of people who are really interested in this stuff and pour my time into those folks, that's how we can really start to affect projects.
Yeah, you multiply your efforts. I love that.
Yeah.
Can you share an example when a cultural shift around technology led to like a real measurable improvement on a project?
Yeah, for sure. Probably the easiest and best example is our drone program. I came to Garney about 2 years ago, and when I came here, it was just kind of the drone program had started, didn't have a lot of scale, wasn't a lot of folks, adopting it. Just they were unsure of the cost and the deliverables and how you use it and everything. So we spent a lot of time doing training and getting people up to speed. And we had a couple jobs that they were just like, man, just from I don't even want to, yeah, a documentation. It sped up so many of their workflows and gave them so much information that it kind of grew like wildfire. And now we've got drones and 360 cameras on pretty much every job that's a size, even small jobs. I mean, we've got a program built out now where it's kind of become the norm. It's not, it used to be like, oh, are you going to do drones? It's like, what kind of drone are you going to use and how are you going to use it kind of thing. So that's been cool to see. And we're looking to step that up to another level and really try to get more meaningful impact out of that. But now that we have adoption, it's easier to go back and really fine tune, what we can get out of it.
Are you guys pilots or autonomous or a mix?
We've got a bunch of pilots. We're looking to do more of the dock style solutions. It's very difficult to scale a large number of pilots and manage and maintain them. So we're trying to figure out what the right mix is there. But like I said, the nice thing is we have, 2 years worth of data now that shows us like, what are we flying? How are we flying it? Now we can really start to make some kind of informed decisions on like, what does the next 4 years of our drone program look like? And we can, I was actually a little hesitant to scale as quickly because it's like, well, you want to get everything in place and have it be perfect. But I kind of like this. There's a thing out there, I think it's from SpaceX, but it shows their Raptor engine and it says, make it exist first and then you can make it better later. And I think a lot of times we try to get everything perfect and we never actually create the thing. Right. So we try to take that approach to a lot of things, like with the understanding of like, hey, we're not perfect, but we need to make this exist and make it real. And then we can go in and actually, fine tune it, improve it as time goes on.
I like the saying better done than perfect.
Yeah.
At least you
Yeah.
take the first step.
Yeah. If you never create it, then you can never really make it perfect, So we try to take that same thought as well when it comes to anything we're doing.
Okay, excellent. How do you ensure technology doesn't feel like extra work and instead becomes a natural part of daily workflows? I think you talked about internal champions.
Yeah, for sure.
Value.
Yeah, there's a couple other things I can add there. I mean, really, whenever you get something new to an organization or to a culture of a company, it is extra work. And I don't think we need to run away from that. We just have to understand that, hey, there is going to be extra work. So if we really want to, if we see that there's value, that's what we have to understand is what's the value proposition. Like if we agree that this is valuable, then let's figure out how to make it work for our teams, right? So a lot of that comes from making sure we have the right solution. Is this the right tool? If it's that difficult, then it may not be the right tool. or is our process correct, right? So we focus a lot on, getting the tool out there and then really dialing in that process and going back to it. You can't just add, you have to figure out where you subtract, right? And then the easiest solutions that we find are ones that have a low learning curve. I think if you look at the last 3 years, technology companies like TrueLook and a lot of other companies we work with, they get this. They make the interfaces super simple. They make setup simple. They make user accounts simple. Before, you used to have an admin and you'd have to go click 17 different buttons in 18 different places. And like, it was just a lot of work, And now everything's so streamlined and it's getting so much more connected. And I think that's the other thing. Using tools that integrate with stuff that our guys are already using is another big thing. If sometimes it's just login fatigue. Like I have to manage another password, but if we can put them all in one centralized place where they go to one app or two apps to get everything they need, like that's that's been really good. But we kind of look at our goal for our construction technology team is we're not so much, I don't like the words productivity and efficiency. Our team members are not robots. I'm not trying to drive those numbers and measure that. We're more about reducing friction for our project teams and making sure they got the tools they need and the training they need. And I think if that's a little harder to measure than a hard number, but that's what we're ultimately trying to do is just make it where it doesn't feel like extra work. We want that to be a process to be as simple as possible and make it easy to see the value of whatever technology is adding.
Yeah, let's let AI figure out productivity and efficiency, and why don't
That's
we
kind of where
just
I'm
work on
at,
one
man. It's like,
outcome?
yeah, it's, now all that to say, like, it is very difficult to improve something you can't measure. And
That's
that's
right.
something that we're fighting. That's something we're fighting a little bit right now is like, how do we make sure, because feelings are subjective, right? We want to have some kind of objective metric to make sure that we can track ourselves and make sure that we're, actually improving, outcomes and stuff like that. So a lot of that stuff ultimately right now is just kind of made up. But I do think as we start to capture more and more data, we can use AI tools to really look in and say, hey, give us some insights to what we're doing. Where could we get better? Or where could we, where are we falling down and stuff like that. And we've tried that to a degree. Going back to having everybody in one place, like we're Microsoft, so we have everything in Copilot. I never thought I would talk to a chatbot as much as I do. It is crazy. I have full blown conversations with this thing about just anything, like conversation like we're having right now. We can talk to it about the future of really about anything and just get its insight, and it's pretty interesting. Do I take it all as gospel? No, but it is pretty intriguing the amount of information it can give me in a short period of time. So definitely think there's some value there.
Awesome. But what habits
Yeah.
or processes help sustain a tech forward culture long term instead of having it fade kind of after a rollout?
Yeah, my entire career has pretty much been spent in the support space. So when I was in equipment operations, we supported the production guys. When I worked for dealers, we supported customers. And ultimately, what we're doing now is we're supporting our field teams. So what does that look like? Support is, do I want everybody calling me so I have to answer the phone and answer everybody's questions? No. Ultimately, that is a piece of it. Our goal is more to play offense than defense, to invest in project startup, to invest in training, and make it where folks can solve their own problems. But ultimately, if you can support a product, a software, whatever that may be, well internally, maybe it's a mix of internal and external, vendors. But if you can support a product and people know that it's supported, it will get adopted. We've seen it happen over and over and over. And a lot of that just comes down to people are more willing to try something if they know that there's someone there to help them on the other end of it. So we really we're trying to build out our support right now is emails and phone calls, which is perfectly fine. It works for everybody, but we're really trying to look at what's that next step look like. How can we go back and gather more data and insights and really like I said, get off defense and go on offense and make sure that we're out attacking the problems before they become problems and making sure that we give, our project teams all the tools and information they need to essentially not need us. I mean, ideally, if they're not calling to ask for help, then we're spending our time on offense, and that's where we want to be. And I think we can get there. But the next probably 2 years is going to be a lot of defense, hopefully transitioning more to offense.
Yep. I think every company works on how do we be more proactive. Now, I know we do. It's our thing is
Yeah.
like, how do we feed up the insights before a problem is a problem? If a company wants to shift its culture towards innovation, what's the one small action they can start with tomorrow?
Man, the thing that I think has the most impact for shifting a culture is leadership buy-in. If everyone who's in the field, your more junior team members, FEs and stuff like that are clamoring for technology, but your leadership doesn't see the value in it or isn't willing to at least try it, it's going to be very hard to ever have a culture that adopts any sort of technology or innovation. So, and I know that's easier said than done, but we have our leadership here at Garney has been fantastic. If I went and talked to them, they don't know everything about the technology, but they put a lot of trust in us to kind of steer this ship and given us a pretty long leash with the understanding of, we're very transparent on what we're working on and what we're doing. And I think if companies have to figure out like what's the realistic amount of, let's call it risk that they're willing to take and build that into their execution plan as a company, right? And not be afraid to. The nice thing is none of this stuff it's 2025. Like a lot of this stuff's been around since the 70s. Like it's all pretty well figured out. There's not a whole lot of curveballs out there anymore. It's just getting the right partners, giving people the bandwidth to do it and, having some capital to go invest in these technologies it's not wildly complex, but it's definitely not easy.
Well, that is dynamite advice. I'll close with saying thanks for joining me, Scott. You're a pro. It's always great to have guys like you here. And I'll say to the audience that's listening, if you enjoyed this, there's more Field Forward series on the Truist website and on YouTube with lots of industry pros just like Scott giving us their opinions. Appreciate you. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, Joe. Appreciate you, man.